The King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast, where we dive deep into the media industry headlines and dissect the digital disruption that diverges the masses into the new media counterculture and away from the media establishment. Here is the King of Podcasts.
I want to thank you for joining me for my 200th episode of the Broadcasters Podcast here at broadcasterspodcast.com, which, if any of you happen to go ahead and catch this show from episode 1, when I called the show Creative Not Corporate initially, and then changed it somewhere a couple of years in, and I said to myself, where we are now in the digital disruption, and really even the direction of what the show is going to be about has changed so much. So January 6th of 2022 will be starting into my 5th year, or excuse me, my 4th year doing the program. But yeah, been doing the show, and it's been a growing experience. At first I did guests. I haven't really done any guests now in a long time. It's been since really the pandemic, when I had all that time to go and record guests. I just got all guests interviewed out. And also there was just so much going on in the news coming out of the pandemic that we've been so covered with that, it's been, I don't have a shortage of content each week. When I'm looking through and I'm saying to myself, I start preparing and I'm looking and like this week, another trove of news to go through, because I also wanted to expand the lineup, expand a little bit more on the content, make it a little more consumer friendly, more so people that would just layman that want to just get into the podcast and listen to it, they can. So I do want to start off with sports betting and sports gambling taking over the live TV sports landscape. So we'll go into that. And I want to take a little time to talk about the direction of the digital disruption when it comes to all of our forms of media, including social media. A couple new things happening within Twitter and Spotify. They're adding some new things in that are interesting. And I'll take a little bit of time to talk about the Travis Scott concert and the Astroworld Festival from last weekend that everybody was just, you couldn't get away from. I could have brought it up last week, but there wasn't that much to get off, to really go and report on. Plus, it just became just a divisive issue. I just wanted to stay out of it. But I will report on the lawsuits that have come out as a result of it. Then I also have the IATSE strike and the contract being prepared for a vote and where people feel about it. There's a lot of things that are coming up right there, because we know that with the IATSE vote, the working conditions were never met as part of the demands made for the reason to strike. But they got to this point to get some kind of a deal done, and the IATSE brass are saying, hey, let's go ahead and sign and let's ratify this and move forward. But my thing is, are these workers, the union workers, are they going to go ahead and put their foot down and say, no, thank you for the money on streaming. Thank you for the other concessions you made. But the real concession is we're going to put our foot down and say, you know what? You can't push us around anymore. Maybe the union workers are going to realize their power in numbers. And that's what they're going to do right now. So they've let their membership say what they're going to say. And they've heard the demands, but they only took so much, which would be expected. And prior where the studios were going to be more than reasonable to say, yeah, we're going to have to give them a bone this time because where we are. Okay, well, they got to that point, but now there might be enough opposition here to make the vote not ratifiable, push it back, and who knows what happens next. I'd like to see if there actually becomes a change in Hollywood, because you need to go and show who's boss. Really show that if, as a collective, if you want things to change, then you have to go and, take the sacrifice, which I talked about extensively a few weeks ago. So there's that to talk about. Plus, one of the stories I talked about way back at the beginning of the series, Moviepass making a comeback from the dead. That's funny. There's much more to bring up. I'm even loaded with stories. So I have all that to go and bring up. Coming up here, the 200th edition of the Broadcasters Podcast. Want to take a minute to go and just reflect, because I go back to the initial episode that I did. It was the state of pop culture media in 2017, the corporate obstacles to come in 2018. And The movie box office was in decline at that point. TV habits continued to change on demand. Music streaming continued to climb. And at that point was really the focus of the program because of the fact I said radio and TV are trying to stay relevant in abeyance of the corporate suits in the ongoing evolution of consumers becoming on demand and consuming more of their own time. Because so much has changed since then. You might remember. We had that. And then here we are, and things have changed completely. The fact that we had this pandemic to work through and the effect it did to media, among other things that changed everything, the whole scope of where we are now. Since I started the program, we had Netflix, we had Amazon as major streaming sources. And, streaming on Netflix was just really getting started. Amazon, the same thing. Now, we are flooded with competition. We've had casualties as a result in Quibi. When it comes to radio, you realize how much of a change there's been with the streaming services and how much they've moved along and how much they've adopted more listeners than ever. How important they are to the charts and how important all the record companies have become to the streaming, the loyalty right now and the focus they have on streaming services because of the fact that promotions are not even being focused on radio or other places. They're trying to get streaming done. They're trying to make as much as they can off of streaming, whatever they can. And the way that songs are promoted anymore are no longer promoted as singles in the traditional sense, except for a number of artists that can still get away with that at such a high level. That's where we are now. So that has become a huge change. And then going through and seeing what else they have, it's like there was so much change happening, and then just saying to myself, the pandemic also created some opportunities because the box office has been getting a pretty good comeback overall. Like, I don't know if they've made it to a point where how much the entire box office season has made. They're not going to get the $4 billion like they had, with Avengers, Infinity War, and all these other big titles that were going on that year. But they're pulling some good numbers this year. A couple weeks ago, the global box office was reported on by the Hollywood Reporter, and the forecast was said to be, if estimates were to hold, $21.6 billion would be 80% ahead of 2020, but 49% behind 2019. That was the estimate there. And at the moment, China is making more money than the U.S. But right now, without having a full season of movies to work off of, the movie chains are saying some good news right now, and they're doing pretty well for themselves. So when you look at AMC reporting that for the month of October, the admissions revenue was 90% of what it was in 2019. So getting back to where it was. We have a boatload of movies right now that started up in October and leading up into November, December, you're loaded with movies. Like, there's a lot of choices to go for right now. And some movies that have stayed over and doing pretty well when it comes to the Marvel movies, Halloween Kills, things like that. That's really helped out. So that right there is taking up a lot. That's a help for the movie front. For television, streaming is king. And we've talked extensively about the continuous drop and decline in TV shows, and also the fact that the importance of first-run television shows is getting a back seat because now with every program that you see out there, even on network TV, they're promoting their streaming provider for on-demand so they can catch it after the fact. But the networks themselves, when you look at what they're doing right now, on average of what they're getting in terms of an audience, and just during November sweeps, by the way, let's put it like that too. If you look at the numbers they're having at this moment, the top 20 primetime shows on the networks, well, they're also including some things on cable. Well, if you look at it, sports claim the top 7 primetime shows. Let's just put that off there right there. World Series, NFL football, you range between 11 to 15 million viewers for any said number of networks right there. Yellowstone is the top rated scripted show on either cable or television, cable or network TV. 8.3 million viewers for the season premiere of Yellowstone. Then 60 Minutes, 7.5 million for the regular, the alphabet networks. NCIS, 7.28 million. And then really, CBS has a number of shows for an older demographic at over 7 million, 6 million viewers. For, say, a younger audience, you could say, well, you could say The Voice, 6.5 million, but after that, everybody else is just drowning. The late night shows are falling apart. Like, every show now is under 2 million viewers. The evening news, less than 20 million viewers total. And that wasn't like that before. And that's where we are right now. I mean, cable and network TV is catering to an older audience. Whoever will stay adopted to cable because they're stuck with their bundles and they're still kind of used to the fact that they want to still be able to use a remote control to watch television. So there's that. But when you're going into streaming, bigger story. Big changes altogether. And that's one of the major things we got to talk about. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get into my major subject here because I did mention I was going to talk about sports betting and sports gambling. Let's get into that now, and let's talk about it. Now, the fact of the matter is, I had to go and find this story from Wall Street Journal from another place because their damn paywall, which if you remember me talking about the paywall issues on last week's episode 199, you'll see that I was pretty, it's miffing. Who wants to go and pay for, be nickeled and dimed on paywalls? Hell, I even had that contention with some of the podcast programming that we're talking about on the full-time commitments I'm at about how much to charge for premium content. But over here, we're talking about how much stuff goes behind a paywall for publications that are just trying to make any kind of money they can and struggling with it as a result. So the story that comes in, the playing business of deluge of sports betting advertisers and free money affords on TV, radio, and online are starting to concern regulators. So online playing operators reminiscent of DraftKings and FanDuel are spending lots of tens of millions of dollars, huge shares of revenues on advertising and marketing sports wagering in the interest of the American shopper. Well, this is normal in Europe. The UK, you can find this all over the place. And to catch this now on television, no surprise. Especially when it comes to the sports programming, it's getting, it's getting blasted with so many commercials for Caesar Sportsbook, BetMGM. I mean, just go look, and it's out there. The other thing I could tell you too is that I'm not much of a bettor or a gambler myself, but I also know that there's a disruption when it comes to gambling because now all these major casinos that have locations in Vegas and say in New Orleans or Atlantic City and other places, they are moving along and they're also changing up the way that certain odds are being made for games, over-unders, things like that, and being very aggressive to lure bettors and gamblers alike to go ahead and play on their sites, making the Vegas sportsbooks have to go very competitive because of how loose some of these sites are with the odds for the online betting. So making a very interesting market altogether. The push contains celebrity-filled commercials, promoting on billboards and podcasts and sponsorships reminiscent of a DraftKings emblem superimposed on the pitcher's mound of a Major League Baseball broadcast. Sports activities betting executives say they're delicate to the problems around promoting, cautious about drawing regulatory scrutiny, and they plan to manage themselves, whereas specializing in accountable messaging. Now, there are some viewers saying it's an excessive amount of ads. So a contract author in New York, Michael J. Lewis, watches sports activities on TV, mentions sports betting messaging is incessant, despite the fact that mobile betting isn't operating in New York. For now, sports betting operators say they're prepared to compromise their very own profitability with advertising and marketing campaigns. As a result, their predominant objective is to have a big buyer base. Well, you know what's going to happen. They have no choice. I mean, when you talk about live sports, there's a lot of money being spent on the broadcast rights for all these programs. And they're not making it with their normal setup. They can only take so many insurance ads and do something with. And then some of the other ads they put on there are just not going to get the attention. But since wagering, online wagering is being much more open now for more states, including my state of Florida, then they're going to do that. And now they're doing more than ever. Because, you know, when you think about it, they have to take advertising from anybody now. There's just no choice. I mean, the kind of money being spent right now on live sports, you can't help but take the Vegas money. Because all these networks, they're desperate. You know, they are going to try to go ahead and they're going to have to go and pony up more money for broadcast rights coming up in a couple of years for all the major sports franchises. The NHL was like $1 billion deal, which is more than ever before. I mean, it's going to be where the type for live sports streaming is trying to be secured because that's the only thing, the real bastion of real money making for the networks left. Because they have the Super Bowl, the World Series, the NBA playoffs, things like that. And they're willing to put it on prime time. And if they might have it on cable, they'll also put it on network because they're going to have to do whatever they can to continue. And I think you're going to see more of that than ever, especially when it comes to, network TV. They're going to start putting in more sports programming. I really think that's going to happen pretty soon. They have no choice. What else are they going to do? And when all these advertisements for sports betting comes in, they're going to take the money. Right now, there are no politicians running ads right now. You're not going to run any ads, there's not many Black Friday ads going right now for holidays. Probably not a lot of retailers that have the money for it. And if they do, they're trying to get online deals. But that's only temporary short-term spend. For sports betting, it's year-round because there's always some sporting event going on almost every day, 365 of the year. So if they can pull people in, I know the casino is going to make a whole lot of money. This opening only just, the incessance is going to be much more, Michael, to your detriment, that's going to happen much more. Within the month between September 9th and October 17th, FanDuel, DraftKings, and Caesars Entertainment, Caesars Sportsbook, spent greater than $15 million on nationwide promoting in keeping with Tracer iSpot television. Adverts embody a forward-like risk-free bets and free cash for brand new accounts. Earlier than the present NFL season started, though the first half of the year, DraftKings and FanDuel already been utilizing a big chunk of income to advertise their manufacturers. DraftKings reported income of almost $620 million for the first 6 months of 2021. So they have the money to put out to make back. Like they're getting more than enough net profit on the advertisements they're putting out there. FanDuel declined to remark. Caesars did not reply to a request for DeMarc to Wall Street Journal. These corporations have applications designed to advertise accountable playing and a growing base of gamblers soon enough, because then more states are going to open up. Legalization will happen state by state, and then it's just going to open up. It'll be a matter of time before New York gets it and other places. Just watch. But now, of course, the sports betting brands, they also need to do something to make sure that people can play responsibly and do their due diligence about people that are going to be gambling addicts as a result of this, because we know that's going to happen too. The NFL Wednesday unveiled a brand new problem gambling marketing campaign. Follow your sport plan at all times. Guess responsibly. $6.2 million partnership with the Nationwide Council on Downside Playing for upgrades to a nationwide helpline and grants to group teams. So at the moment, online sports activities betting is working in 17 states and the District of Columbia. Extra states are anticipated to affix. So it does make it tough to impose nationwide requirements. So it was a matter of time. 2015, we started seeing some of these ads come in, but it was more for fantasy sports, not necessarily like the full betting as you have now with Caesars and BetMGM and other places. But that's changed up. So fantasy sports activities advertisements from DraftKings and FanDuel started in 2015. There were complaints and scrutiny by state attorneys common, and the corporations reduced their advertiser spending, tipping over an invisible line. So there's that part. The other part to consider is about what publishers should be doing when it comes to getting this kind of advertisement. Because there's a consideration of that needs to be put into play. Digiday reports on this. Quote, "We are the media company. Sportsbooks are spending millions of dollars on media deals, but publishers should hedge their bets." The relationships between sports publishers and sports betting companies are increasingly common, and the outcome for media companies is wildly lucrative in the grand scheme of sponsorship deals. So even in publications, so websites, newspapers, things like that, you know, the sports books are putting the investments in, and they're able to quickly acquire new sports bettors in the U.S. as states continually legalize online sports gambling. But media companies may not want to put their money on sports books, staking them over the long run. Bettors are becoming media companies in their own right, and the potential for consolidation could take stacks of revenue chips off the table. Because then what's going to happen is these sports books, they're going to start taking their own content. I mean, we already know that Bally's has already put themselves into branding with the Sinclair Broadcast Group regional cable sports networks that were originally Fox Sports branded. Now they're all Bally Sports. That's just a matter of time. So one expert, an EVP in North America at sports marketing agency Two Circle says, quote, "There's a bubble forming and there will be a reckoning at some point." So working with sportsbooks is becoming big business for media. Bettors see the U.S. market as a jackpot, and publishers are having the hot hand to help them acquire customers. Yeah, for a short time for themselves. But the thing is, this is the thought where the media is going to be able to go ahead and live off these sports books and getting their money from them. No, the sports books are taking the opportunity to go and get media buys now. But they're going to find it, just like any good entity out there, the digital disruption allows companies like these sports books to create their own media content, because then you can just cloud it up. And then you can overlook what's being done by the ESPNs and the Fox Sports of the world. And that completely changes the whole landscape. Happened in Europe. So Gannett Publishers, that there was a Home USA Today, among other newspapers, they signed a 5-year-long deal with European sportsbook Tipico, which is worth $90 million in fixed cash. So that's it. Flat $90 million. These newspapers, they're dying for that kind of money. So it gives the publisher an ability to earn affiliate revenue on new betting customers that drives to Tipico, according to Michael Reed, CEO and chairman of Gannett. The publisher also has the ability to own up to 4.9% of the betting company based on performance goals, though he declined to share what those were. So, affiliate deals. So, not only will they get the $90 million fixed, but the deal is the newspapers, these websites, they're now recruiting new gamblers. Do you see what we're doing right here? Do you see how that's working? They're going to use these media companies, and then they're going to pull out and make their own content. Well, thank you for the help of getting our subscriber bases up and getting more gamblers over here. You know, yeah, we don't need you anymore to use for advertising. We can do it ourselves. We can do our own sports programming. We got better sports writers. We could get better sports writers. We could do better working content online than you could. And, you know, if people were wanting to be betting on their websites, who knows? They could probably get access to the content without going through a damn paywall, right? Sports Podcast Network. Now, also, let's just put this as well. So with Gannett, they also have niche brands like Golf Week and MMA Junkie and 250 local sports markets reaching a national scale. And their 500 local sports reporters and marketing teams would produce everything from branded columns, video series, blogs, newsletters, promotions, and events. Yeah. The newspapers are going to get pimped out by the sports books. Sports Podcast Network Blue Wire has been able to bank on sportsbook media interest. February WinBet, which is the Wynn Casino in Las Vegas, signed a 3-year-long deal with Blue Wire that is worth $3.5 million investment in the media company in exchange for partial ownership. So take the cash, grab this podcast network, and give up ownership. Partial. Now, I don't know how much that is. And at least $1 million in advertising revenue and a multi-million-dollar recording studio built at the Wynn Las Vegas that opened in early September. There you go. And then others like DraftKings have taken a broader approach to media partnerships, signing deals left and right with more publishers, including Warner Media, Vox Media, and even individual creators to start producing in-house content. They're going to take over. Just wait and tell you. Hey, just like everything else. And will the publications know? No. They're taking the money the short term because they have no one else that will advertise with them, and they need the money to survive. But what they realize is that they're only going to survive for a short time, and they're not going to have a plan after this to survive afterwards. Because once these sports books and all these different sports betting sites come on with their own content, they will deem Gannett Sports and all these other publications, Fox Media, irrelevant, and deem them obsolete on top of that. So for all these writers, you might want to go and, make sure you get in good with these sports books so you can go and keep writing content for them. You'll do branded content for them, and you'll do other content. At least you'll have some other place to go. So do a good job for them so you can find job placement after these other publications go by the wayside. A lot of desperation right now with publications. As I talked about not too long ago, what was it that you have certain entities that are trying to get, Vice Media is trying to get into a SPAC, trying to get investment money, it's almost going to be like they're going to be brought into a special purpose acquisition company, and they're going to probably use like private equity. So, the assets can be just unloaded as they want, which is what they've been doing with them anyway, just the way Gizmodo might have handled things, just the way like other companies have. Now with DraftKings, as I mentioned, $620 million, $1 billion, right? No, $620 million in the first 6 months. And one of the things they did for the NFL season was they put a lot of ads over on the first Thursday night NFL game, and more than double the bets from last season's first game placed on this platform. They didn't disclose the total number of bets. But, of course, that was a really good game. Cowboys-Buccaneers. Buccaneers won. 27 million viewers. Regardless of where they're orchestrating their media partnership strategies, these sports gambling companies are spending millions of dollars on what boils down to paid media and branded content. But why are these companies prioritizing media partnerships for the digital campaigns? Because it'd be easier than jumping through the hoops necessary to run ads. Now, notice we're not getting a whole lot of this on social media. We still can't get that yet. Social media is still, policing. We can't get cannabis ads up there and other ads that might be controversial. They're not allowed to go and post. But social media platforms like Facebook, make the traditional advertising process difficult. So when a sports publisher already has curated a following of 1 million sports fans on that platform, it becomes more appealing to create a branded video, for instance, and then have them organically circulated on their page with the added benefit that it looks more genuine to the viewer. So because of Facebook, Twitter, and all these social media outlets not taking advantage of the money that can be spent by the sports books, well, this gives the opportunity to go ahead and, take advantage of the dying legacy traditional media outlets. Use them for what they're worth in sports, which is something that still is relevant on all those platforms. And Digital talks about what happens with media companies' sports betting hot streak could go cold. So these campaigns, these companies are primarily targeting casual bettors or those interested in betting but are not heavy gamblers. This demographic of gamblers is likely to download and set up one sportsbook app and use that for the bulk of their online bets going forward. There's little differentiation between sportsbooks at the end of the day unless you're a serious gambler. Yeah, you're going to go to the places that have the most, the bets that are most favorable. The over-unders, the play, and the money they can make back is what they want to care about. The action. How good the action is on any kind of bet they can make. So they'll price it out. They'll figure it out themselves. The cohort also tends to have a low lifetime value, betting $10 to $15 at a time on a regular cadency. The cost of acquisition, though, some of these partnerships simply don't add up. In 5 years, there's a thought that there will be 20 sportsbooks operating in the U.S. Instead, there will probably be 3 to 4 large sports betting conglomerates because they're all going to get, that's how it works. It'll be to a few companies that will be the ones that will stand above that have acquired all the low to mid-sized companies that couldn't compete in the user acquisition race. We know that's how it works in media. Certain outlets you get all these different studios, all these different companies, and then deregulation basically is in, and this company they get so big, acquire. They'll be like Viacom, they'll be like NBC Universal, they'll be like everybody else. And then we'll have, a lack of variety, and we'll just have more really monopolies as a result after all this is said and done. So there are many parallels that are being said that can be drawn to the UK and European sports betting companies who have had a head start in the U.S. over the U.S. in building their businesses. And a lot of consolidation has occurred over there. And there are only two major sportsbook companies that have acquired smaller entities in the space, William Hill and Paddy Power. And then the other threat to sports publishers' relationships with sportsbooks is the potential for more sportsbooks to turn into their publishers' competition. And this is what I talked about in the other story. So sports bettors like DraftKings and Penn National Gaming are going all in. January 2020, Penn National Gaming bought a 36% stake in Barstool Sports for almost $163 million cash and convertible preferred stock. And as of October 19th this year, the sportsbook completed a $2 billion purchase of Canadian sports media company The Score, rolling out its own sports betting app in 2019. Yep. DraftKings also looks to become a publisher in their own right. They took their first step at becoming a content creator, partnered with Vox's SB Nation to create the vertical DraftKings Nation. March 2021, they acquired sports betting radio and streaming network Vegas Sports Information Network for undisclosed price. DraftKings gets their name on 24/7 sports betting coverage. And then in September, the company began programming video content on the YouTube channel. And the likes of Gary Vaynerchuk, who is now hosting a weekly show for DraftKings called Gary V's Die Hard Dialogue, tasked with creating more culture content for the sportsbook rather than hard analysis. We see where it's going. It's going to eventually happen. But the media doesn't know what else to do. You know, they can't figure out the new mousetrap because the mousetrap is not in their platforms anymore. It's digital. And so these publications, I wouldn't be surprised if DraftKings or, Bally Sports or, Penn Gaming or, or Barstool with Penn and all these other deals come in and we start seeing more of the branding of these casinos and these sports books to just draw bigger brands. And then who knows what else can happen. I think it's very interesting and we should keep an eye on that. It's the digital disruption in full effect. This could very much change the scope of everything going on. What happens if we get this into programming? If there's a way for this digital programming, if we start seeing digital streaming coming up, where advertising will not be necessary, they'll just be branded content. And they'll have streaming platforms of sports programming, and they might have ads embedded in it. And they'll find a way to get the advertisements continuing on, but it'll be them controlling the media. So it could be very much something that happens down the line. So keep an eye on that. So traditional media needs to go ahead and find ways to keep going forward or find a way to continue to sustain before the digital disruption leaves them in the wayside, which is what I've been talking about for years here on this program, and we continue to chronicle. Story came out from NewsNationUSA.com talking about technology is transforming the entertainment industry, and they're talking about how. They're saying that there's been a major shift in tech developments in the entertainment industry, from music to gaming to films to social media. There are specific ways each sector has evolved dramatically within the information age environment. So when it comes to music now, online course providers like Masterclass and Udemy making it possible for anyone to learn about music production and creation. Live concerts being streamed now in real time at a fan's own comfort and convenience. And between social media and high quality domains, the way music is marketed and enhanced as well establishes new listening audiences so far. And new songs and entire albums released on apps like Apple Music and Spotify instead of physical retailers, which has been long gone. Gaming opportunities we talked about as well. Well, this is gaming in terms of online or gaming in VR AR technologies, because now you have gaming communities inhabiting every spot on the globe. There's no doubt the sector's flourishing, and this technology has given access to other gaming genres outside traditional video games, such as online casino gaming, which we know, hey, if you can get the gambling kind of fix, you can get somebody with a fever to go ahead and bet or put money down, they'll find a way to do it. Casino providers feature hundreds of slot games and different themes and categories so that players can enjoy unlimited real spins without having to travel to a brick and mortar location. So just the thought of doing that, and then the chance they're going to be on an actual machine to hit that lever, yeah, they're going to want to do it. You're just creating the whole attitude, the sounds, the feels. You're getting that real release of endorphin, just like the energy, excitement of it. It makes it exciting. Social media networks are providing constant entertainment. So there are now these apps on everyone's mobile phone, and many users checking their content multiple times a day. Right now, TikTok is the most downloaded non-gaming app worldwide in October. 57 million downloads in October alone. We know there are already well over 1 billion users now, or 1 billion subscribers that already have that installed on their phones or devices. Plus, TikTok just got added to Amazon Prime, or excuse me, the Amazon Fire Stick as well. So imagine that. So many of today's big companies, both social media influencer marketing are an absolute must. Social networks are not going away anytime soon. It's only a matter of time before the entertainment industry yields further to their influence. Short story, but they bring a couple of points across. It's to give the context of what this digital disruption is and how much has changed. And originally, the idea of creative, not corporate, was the idea of creative content providers, content creators, and the fight they were having with the big corporate giants. But the story definitely changed. I realized that. So when I call it the Broadcasters Podcast, I'm talking about those that are finding a way to broadcast, whether it's social media, through music, movies, TV, and radio. And now they don't have to go to the normal traditional routes. They don't need an FM AM signal. They don't need a UHF or VHF signal. We don't even need record stores. And you don't even need a box office anymore to get your content out there. So broadcasters is much more than everything else in media in general. And not to mention that some sections of the media have hurt themselves. And Facebook getting, privacy issues, things that have been unloaded about that. Twitter in the same vein. TikTok and the data that might be shared with China, things like that. It's all that's being put under contention. But then you just also look at what is being done now and how much more programming is being done live that people can do to broadcast live. Might call it webcast, but still it's broadcasting. Now you're broadcasting to a global audience. And it's you. And in some cases, some people are doing content where they can also use these said social media platforms or these video platforms to make money off of it, depending on what they want to do. There's so much more that's coming up out of that you have to just go and realize. Interesting story from Neiman Lab. Twitter subscription product is now called Twitter Blue. It's now launching in the U.S. It lets you undo tweets. But let's go look at what Twitter Blue actually provides. Twitter's been doing some things, along with the whole Clubhouse idea, which Clubhouse came with a whole subject now where they can actually you can record your live sessions, which is a nice thing. They should have had that from the beginning, but eventually would get there. For Twitter Blue, for $2.99 a month, you get access to an undo button, a nozzle-like top stories feature, ad-free articles sending a portion of revenue back to publishers. A handful of new features build on technology offer the news startup Scroll, which Twitter acquired in May. And so Twitter Blue is meant to be made for this following demographic. Super tweeters, people who tweet a lot and or spend a lot of time on the site, verified Twitter users, especially those with large followings, and news lovers, people who can't get enough of reading and keeping up with the news. So for some journalists, they feel like it's going to be a chance for some of them to be follow along and some of their content can actually get monetized from Twitter as opposed to the websites you're publishing from. Twitter Blue subscribers visiting sites like the Washington Post, LA Times, The Atlantic, Reuters, Mother Jones, Insider, Slate, BuzzFeed, Philadelphia Inquirer will more see the article content without ads. Twitter will also note mid-feed which articles are being ad-free, nudging more to click. So it doesn't mean you're going to bypass paywalls, but if you're not already a subscriber to LA Times, for instance, you might still hit the publication's paywall. It's not perfect. And then a portion of the subscription revenue will go directly towards supporting the partner publications, allocated based on how much time an individual Twitter Blue user spends on each site in a month. And I don't know if it's going to make much money off of it, but this is the whole idea. Using a simple and transparent algorithm, the top for articles feature will show a Twitter Blue user the articles that have been most tweeted by the people that they follow in the last 24 hours. Unlike trending topics, it's not curated or moderated by Twitter employees. It's a different and complementary way to experience Twitter. So there's that part. Now, also, Twitter's going to introduce an undo option that gives Twitter's Blue subscribers 60 seconds to edit their tweet before they go live. So it's like undo send on Gmail, which is a godsend, by the way. Offers a similar feature for the times you hit and send and then notice you signed your email Satan rather than Sarah. Now, will this ever get extended to the user base? Because an undo button would be nice for all Twitter followers, including myself. By the way, I'm on Twitter at King of Podcast. I do post from time to time, but, depending on, I don't take a lot of time with social media, especially when the followers that I have has not changed in like 5 years. When I look at it, and I remember purging a lot of the people that was following me before. And I'm saying to myself, it doesn't change. Like right now, I cut out, what was it? I might have had, almost 3,000 people I was following. And I just cut that all out. I cut it down to under 1,000. And at the moment, I'm still at 2,500 followers. It's been the same for forever. So many bots that I have out of there. Like, that's the whole point. I don't know. But I've been around 2,500. I never got over 3,000. I've been in the same spot forever. So it is what it is. Anyways. You can also have the ability to create bookmark folders to organize tweets. So you might want to keep looking at tasty looking recipes in a different folder than potential story ideas. The other thing that's also interesting, that another major source is out there. It's one of the streaming providers for music. Spotify is getting into the audiobook business. They acquired audiobook platform Findaway. So this would be the audio giant's first major purchase in the audiobook space, competing with Audible, which Audible is fantastic. If you haven't been, I use Audible all the time. And I have got about 50 books in my library. I have enjoyed it. Going to the silver membership is enough for me to get a credit and find a new book I want to go and read. And I can only find some books I would definitely want to check out and find out for myself. I have never been a shortage of Audible books. That's what it comes down for all of them. Now, Findaway has a full-service and self-service audiobook production platform for authors, narrators, and publishers. Self-service connects independent authors to narrators and provides access to global distribution. Top publishers like HarperCollins and Hachette use the full-service platform for audiobooks. So you can get whatever books you want converted to audiobook by Findaway. That's interesting. And then you can also have it listed on the Spotify platform. Is that an extra price or is that embedded into the price already? Because Audible is a separate cost. So Gustav Soderstrom, Chief Research and Development Officer for Spotify, says that it's Spotify's ambition to be the destination for all things audio, both for listeners and creators. The acquisition will accelerate Spotify's presence in the audiobook space, help us more quickly meet the ambition. Now, they have already tested out a literary offering in January with a collection of 9 exclusive audiobook recordings, as the Hollywood Reporter had reported a while back. Recordings included celebrity narrations of literary classics, Cynthia Erivo reading Jane Austen's Persuasion, Forrest Whitaker reading the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave, Hilary Swank narrating Kate Chopin's The Awakening, among other books. They've been doing a lot of work. They've been picking up podcast companies. They picked up Gimlet Media and Anchor so that people can make their own podcasts, which I have a show on Anchor that I post over there when I'm not podcasting. They have their ad platform Megaphone and live audio developer Betty Labs. They're just like all these other companies. Not only are you going to have, the asset, you're not only going to just buy, sources for media, or you're also going to buy the resources or the applications that you need to help build further what you're doing. That's just crazy. So a lot of work being done. So one other story I'll bring up here, and then I'm going to go into the Travis Scott story next, is Moviepass coming back, because I just want to bring that in because it just is a story I just want to get into real quick. It's a good place to start it right now. Variety reporting that co-founders eye out a relaunch after buying the bankrupt service's assets. After hundreds of millions of dollars before shutting down amid lawsuits and FTC complaint, they might be getting a second chance. They're pursuing to reclaim the brand, encouraged by continued interest from the movie-going community. Theatrical subscription can play an instrumental role in lifting movie-going attendance to new heights. Well, if not for Moviepass disrupting the market, which they're basically what Napster was to music, I mean, that was great that they did that because it forced all the other movie theaters to start creating subscription plans. So AMC A-List and then the Regal Unlimited plan, which I have. You know what? Thank you, Moviepass. You created that disruption. The only problem is that how are you going to go ahead and create the deal now to get Moviepass back up? And when the service launches again, they now have a website, iwantmoviepass.com. Who's going to work with them and partner with them on movie deals, right? What's going to happen there? How are they going to get subscription plans going off of that? That I don't know. I don't think anybody's talked about that yet. So I don't know what they're going to think. I think it's a lost cause, but, you know, if they can find a way to make some deal to get back, they're not going to be able to charge $10 a month like they did before and get people to go watch as many movies as they want. That's not going to happen anymore. But who knows what might become of what they're going to do. I don't know. I'll keep an eye out for it for myself. All right. Travis Scott and the Astroworld Festival. What a tragedy. There are now 9 confirmed deaths as a result of this festival. I don't want to talk about, you know, what Travis Scott's responsibility was to this whole mess, or, you know, the promoters, Live Nation. I'm not going to worry about any of that. But I just think that the story of just the disaster that is of a cash grab that is for Astroworld to have this happen to them. Live Nation is going to be continuing to work, providing as much information and assistance as possible to local authorities as they investigate the situation. It's just a big hit to live music again. For live music to already make their way back, only months after you started seeing some markets starting to open up, this happens. And you could just say, man, what a lack of negligence going on here. So there are several lawsuits already in play. One has been set against Travis Scott and Drake, who joined Travis Scott on stage during a set. Live Nation has a lawsuit against them and NRG Stadium for an individual who was injured during the concert. So yeah, all these Texas lawyers, they're going to take advantage against some clients. Sure. A lot of money to be made. Another law firm is going after Live Nation, Travis Scott, and concert promoter Score More on behalf of concert goers, which were injured during the event. And according to the lawsuit, one suffered serious bodily injuries when the uncontrolled crowd of the concert knocked him to the ground and trampled him. And then another one described the scene of chaos and desperation of the event. Variety reports that Travis Scott is planning to refund all Astroworld ticket holders. The rapper is canceling a live appearance in Las Vegas scheduled for the weekend coming up. That as I'm recording the show. So there's that part. And then the other part they have is the level of lawsuits as a result, and how live music is really going to be in a bad spot. As a report now, Deadline reports that there are 110 plaintiffs against Travis Scott, Drake, Live Nation for one lawsuit. Over 100 clients, class action. They're not going to do well with this. So even if you do let the money go and refund back for the show and lose money on this event, they're going to get hit with more. A major punishment that's going to be put on them, and justifiably so. The suit contends that while Travis Scott and Drake were performing, the crowd got increasingly out of control. Damages suffered by the victims, according to one of the lawyers, says, could total in the billions. What a major hit. You know, not a good way to get things back up. Pretty bad. It's tragic. It's horrible, because when you want to have people coming back to the shows and you don't have a plan in place to handle that big a crowd. Meanwhile, you can see concerts all over the world that never had this kind of trouble at all. And for the responsibility of the artists when they're performing live, that even if they have some people that are just not too smart, that are, they're buying a ticket to go and watch you, they want to have a safe experience. I mean, it's already bad enough that, they're going to get some complaints about the fact that, this could have been a super spreader event. Well, then you got this issue with violence and real chaos and some real fear being set upon some of the people that were there. Because on TikTok, I mean, all this weekend, I just saw person after person after person recounting what happened at the concert and all the problems that were going on. How many of them were true? I don't know. But I wouldn't be doubting that some of them decided, you know what, I'm going to sign up with this lawyer. I'm going to go ahead and be part of this class action lawsuit. Here's my ticket. I was there. Yeah, this happened to me. Show my injuries, whatever. Let me get a payday from Travis Scott. That's what's going to happen. Hollywood Reporter put out another story, and they talked about, I'm going to hold off on that because I want to get into the IATSE stuff, the studio stuff, the unions, because this is still a story that we need to go and keep an eye on. This is one of the things I also brought up that was very important. I already talked about at the beginning of the show. And the thought is that there's opposition growing to the new contract, members preparing to vote, and industry faces uncharted waters. So in that story, taking it from Deadline as well, there is rank and file opposition to the new tentative agreement and could spell trouble for ratification as the membership begins and ends this weekend to vote on this plan. Opponents have been having a series of members-only town hall meetings expressing discontent and sharing concerns. And the general consensus of the town halls is a no vote, but it'll be very close, some people are saying. If any of the contracts that are up for grabs right now to be ratified are rejected, IATSE leaders can go back to the Alliance of Motion Picture and TV Producers, go back to the bargaining table to try to come up with a better deal. And the AMPTP doesn't have to return. If it does and refuses to budge, IATSE leaders have already called the agreement a landmark deal that meets our members' needs. But if their members are saying, no, not enough, because their issue was you would have all these different locals that would go ahead and step down, and a lot of work will be stopped, which we talked about extensively a few weeks ago. Just look back for the episode that I talked about it. Just do a search for IATSE on broadcasterspodcast.com. You'll find all the stories I talked about it. So as we know, there was some progress being made in issues to working conditions. What would need to happen is the contention is concessions to address the industry's brutally long work days. While there was some progress made in the area and proposed new contracts, nowhere near the 12 hours on, 12 hours off that many opponents of the deal said they want and are willing to go on strike for. Shorter work days also a key issue 3 years ago, but IATSE was able to negotiate the film and TV contract nevertheless. But when is the time right to go ahead and go for it all? That's the idea. But the working conditions is what they're holding off for. And so it can very much be how it is. 90% were ready to go and strike. So they were willing to go for this. So I can see where they say, you know what? There's a better deal we can get. If we decide to go ahead and go all in on this, they can ask for more. And AMPTP needs to go and go back to the bargaining table. And I think that's what's going to happen. I do. IATSE leadership has urged members to unite in support of the agreement, but they're still divided partly among generational lines. Supporters say the deal makes progress on wages and working conditions without giving up ground on the union's gold-plated benefits package. Opponents, many younger members, the contract feels like a perpetuation of unsustainable status quo, where days stretch to 14 to 16 hours, making it impossible to have a life outside of work. The ballots are going out Friday morning. That's the 12th of November as I'm recording this, and are due back by Sunday night at 8:59 p.m. Pacific. And results will be announced on Monday. And, I might do a little When I'm Not Podcasting episode on my YouTube channel if I decide to do that. And then I'll follow back up with it and talk about it here on the program next week. But we'll find out what happens there. But that's where we are. And I think if IATSE wants to go and do it, if they want to go ahead and say, you know what, Hollywood, we want more. You need to come up with more. We have so much solidarity right now to make this happen. So pony up. Thank you for the changes in the money, the wages, the benefits. Wonderful. Now the working conditions. You can do better on that. Treat us, more humanely, I would imagine is the idea. Okay, I'm running out of time here. So only got a couple of stories I'm going to get to next. So I'm going to have to hold off on a couple of stories until next week, which I'm glad I didn't go through all of it. But one other story I want to get into is the Hollywood Reporter. They talk about how broadcast stacks up with streaming and total minutes viewed. So if you want to see the big difference in the digital disruption, which is what I talk about on the show most extensively, well, let's talk about it. CBS is touting strength in the metric most associated with streamers, and Hollywood Reporter decided to check on the network's claims. The network on Wednesday released a chart showing how many minutes viewers have spent with CBS in this 2021-2022 season so far. 166.74 billion minutes with network programming across all day parts first 7 weeks of the season, according to Nielsen figures, equivalent to every person in the United States watching more than 8 hours of CBS programming. That's a pretty big number to say. We know that Netflix and other streaming outlets, they go ahead and offer how many minutes people are watching, which is kind of a bullshit thing if you really ask me. We want viewers. We want demographics. That's what every advertiser wants. So Hollywood Reporter dug into the available numbers to find a comparison. Fox is third with 108.63 million minutes. All three networks, NBC 130 billion minutes, and they all have regular NFL programming that supplies several million minutes of viewing time. So that's where most of their viewing is coming from. CBS says 45 billion minutes have been devoted to NFL coverage. ABC, without a regular NFL presence, 98.54 billion minutes of watch time. Again, doesn't make any difference, but they're trying to go and say, listen, we're still just as good as the streaming services. Well, okay. Total viewing time is Nielsen's metric for streaming programming, and CBS releases its release is meant to put out the staying power of traditional TV in a time when Nielsen's most recent TV survey of TV usage, streaming has nudged past broadcast, which we talked about on the show. So they did a rough estimate for streaming. Hollywood Reporter looked at Nielsen's top 10 streaming charts for the first 4 weeks of the season. The top 10 original series acquired shows and movies in the charts amassed a total of 59.53 billion minutes of viewing time, or an average of 14 billion minutes a week. Too many numbers to go by. But Nielsen's top 10s are limiting. It excludes hundreds if not thousands of titles on Disney+, Hulu, Apple TV+, Netflix, and Prime Video. The 5 outlets Nielsen includes in weekly reports, but they're not talking about HBO Max, Paramount+, Peacock, and other niche streamers that have been put out publicly. So when it comes down to non-NFL coverage, Squid Game has the most watch time of any programming on streaming, 10.45 billion minutes from September 20th to October 17th. The biggest show CBS mentions individually is The Price is Right, which is racking up 8.6 billion minutes of viewing in the fall. So Nielsen really doesn't matter much anymore. And now the networks are playing with the same metrics that the streaming services are doing. And they're doing that because you need to be able to go and keep their advertisers at bay. And say, hey, you want to talk about minutes? We can talk about minutes. Here we go. Nielsen give us minutes. Minutes don't mean shit. Let's just say it as it is. I think it's pretty funny. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. So this concludes my 200th episode of the Broadcasters Podcast. And I mean, really, I don't get tired of doing this show. I really enjoy it. It's one of those things where I think some of the best podcasts out there are when you want to talk about things you just can't just go have a regular conversation with anybody else. Because when I try to have conversations about the media before, there might be a few people I could talk to. But first of all, they don't have the attention span like I do about it. They don't look at the information like I do about it. They don't care as much as I do about it. And that's why I think it's important when I do this show regularly. Am I getting a big demographic of this? No, not necessarily. This is a show, I know I don't get the kind of audience that other shows would get, but this is very niche. But there should be podcasters out there to do their own niche programming that's not going to reach a large audience, and that's okay too. Because I want shows like that. I want something for everybody in podcasting. So I thought in 2018, I'm going to fit a role here. So January 6, 2018, I said, you know what? I'm going to make this show happen. I planned it in the dead part of 2017. I said, okay, I'm going to plan this show out. I'm going to buy the website, I've originally bought Creative Not Corporate, let that go, moved to the Broadcasters Podcast, did a whole switch, and it was great. And I've enjoyed it. And, I've just learned what to do with the programming to, make it where it's not too in the weeds for everybody. That for me now to go and do an hour-long show, it's like, it's like riding a bike. Like I could talk about things I wanted to just not even use headlines, but I like talking about headlines. The headlines I would want to talk about. It was fun doing the guest interviews. And I want to thank all the guests that I had on the program in between those 200 episodes that did take their time to talk to me pretty extensively for interviews. I'm thankful for all of them. And I see a number of them that are doing very well, and I see them online. I see Remy Jones out, doing, various shows now, and she's doing really well, and I'm happy for her. Larry Namer, I see, working with Omar Akram, who were both guests of the program, that they're working on their own podcast together. And there are many others I could bring up that I had on that were just fantastic. And I really enjoyed having everybody on. And the show's evolved since then. I just don't do so much of the guest interviews, not right now anyway, just because it's not the major focus. But for me, to do what I do now, and to cover the stories that I have, it's a year-long thing. There's always going to be news out there. There's always going to be things to talk about. And for me, I just want to put perspective in that I think about with all the years I've been in media myself and looking out for the people that create the content. There's something to be said about seeing movies coming out that are all reboots, rehashes of everything. TV shows the same way. To hope that you could think that music is still making new music, but then the problem is that all these big corporations, they control what's going on out there, but then the digital media, the web, it opens the door. I mean, I think about the fact that even with Spotify, and I have an account for them, and, I could go ahead and have an account for TuneIn, not the premium package, but I had the one that was kind of grandfathered in where they don't have ads on there for me to go and listen to. Their own advertisements. For me, I'm looking at the fact that I can look for other stations that have the programming that I want. Streaming the music I want, programmed a certain way. I can find it online. I can find different content online of everything out there. More than I ever have me watching cable TV. Because if I do watch cable TV, for the most part, it's for watching wrestling and watching sports. But for the most part, everything else, and then if I want to look for, nostalgia content, stuff that I haven't seen in a while, for me to go on YouTube and find some random episode of Shot on Eye that I remember watching as a kid, Grease for Peace, right? Or watching old school Price is Right episodes or old school Three's Company episodes via Pluto TV, things like that. That's great. And then the amount of, give you what you want. Not waiting for an episode a week. So it's something to be said about watching the new Dexter series and watching one a week. Meanwhile, I watched Narcos Mexico the last season in like 2 days. Things like that. It's an interesting time for media. It's also an interesting time that the traditional media outlets, as I've talked about the mainstream, the mainstream that's out there. There's a crossover mainstream that things will come up that will become popular organically or virally. Meanwhile, the stuff that's trying to be done by your big corporate companies, they're doing pretty good creating content for streaming that's going to be somewhat compelling, but to keep their original platforms alive, becoming harder and harder by the day. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you for listening to the show. If you did listen to all these episodes, I really appreciate it, and I would love feedback from you as well. If you listen to the show on a regular basis and you like it, or you have any comments and you have any criticisms, I'd love to hear all of you. If you find it on the YouTube channel, look for King of Podcasts, or look for youtube.com/JBRASCO951. You can find all my content there, and all my past episodes are there too. You can do that for yourselves. You can leave comments on this episode, or you can email me, kingofpodcasts@yahoo.com or hit the contact form at kingofpodcasts.com, where all my content's available there. So thank you for 200 episodes, for being here with me through all that. Come back for another Broadcasters Podcast. And remember, until next week, content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcasters Podcast. Find all the links to subscribe to the show by going to broadcasterspodcast.com. And don't forget to check out the King of Podcasts wrestling program, the Wrestling is Real podcast, exclusively at wrestlingisreal.com.